Hello and welcome to my channel. It's Just Angela. And you're probably wondering why I'm calling it It's Just Angela. Because it is. It's just me. And I've set this channel up to talk to you about my life. Some of you may have read my story, and this channel is going to be based on my story. And the book I'd written is called Angela, An Earth Angel's Journey. Now, I'm going to start my journey right from the beginning, and even beyond my beginning, if you like. The story is going to be, let's just say, it's going to start with my grandparents and my great-grandparents, because who you are today stems from your grandparents, your ancestors. They are the ones who make you the way you are today. And in my circumstances, I came from a very poor agricultural family. Our family originally came from Prussia. My surname at that time was Presnell, and or should I say, the family name was Presnell, and it descends from Prussia. And when they had the uprising in Prussia, the family decided to go across from Germany through to France and eventually to England. And that was happening in the 17th century, somewhere like that. Anyway, enough of the history. And my grandparents, and indeed my great-grandparents, they were agricultural labourers, and they struggled, like all farmers did, or farm labourers did at that time, because the work was seasonal. And when the season ended, they ended up with no money, and many of my ancestors ended up in the workshops. Not the workshops, the workhouses, that's it. So, as you can imagine, the shock I had when I found out that my great-great-grandfather died in a workhouse in his 70s, and the family couldn't take him with them because they went on to a farm in Graveney, which is in a place called Faversham in Kent. And that was really sad. It was really sad to find that your ancestors, struggled then. And really, if you think about it, nothing really much has changed. It's just that everything's more modern, and we're still struggling. So my great-grandparents ended up having quite a few children, and one of them being my grandfather, called Harold. And Harold met Elizabeth, and Elizabeth came from, should I say, quite a wealthy, not a wealthy family, but they didn't do bad for themselves. They had money. And anyway, they got married I can't remember when they got married, but they got married. And they went on to have 11 children. And one of those children is my mum, and her name is Jean. And she was born in September of 1934. And but the Presnell family had a really hard time. I mean, they lost 2 of their children within days of each other. And I believe it was due to whooping cough. And whooping cough, not whooping cough. Yeah. Bear with me, because I'm an old lady. I've got to try and remember all these things, So, they went on to have all these children. And like a lot of men in those days, the men went out to work, they earned their money, and a lot of them drank their money. And, they just went down to the pub, and they didn't really care about the family and the wives at home. And you can imagine it was a struggle. And especially when you got all those children living in a 2-bedroom house. And so somehow the council, the social workers got to hear of what was going on at my grandparents' house. And the children didn't have hardly any clothing. They didn't have beds or anything like that. And I don't know how the children managed to sleep. I don't know how they managed to get all those people in a 2-bedroom house. And I do remember seeing that house, and it wasn't very big. It was just a normal terraced 2-bedroom house. Anyway, when my mum was 6, that's when her life was totally destroyed. And the council and social services came, and my mum said that she remembers seeing a big black car pull up outside the house and took her away. And they took nearly all the children away. And they had the eldest stayed behind and the youngest stayed behind. But the rest, they were all fostered out and was taken into put into homes. And my mum was very, very close to my Aunt Sandra. And you can imagine my Aunt Sandra, being pulled away, wrenched away from her own family and her sister. And so anyway, they were shoved from pillar to post. And I still remember, their lives wasn't easy. Their lives was really, really hard when they were put into foster care. And one of my uncles, he told me that he was sexually abused by men within the care system. And it tormented him right up until the day he died. So, that was awful. That really was awful. And so anyway, my mum was fostered, eventually she found a foster home, and she was fostered in Worcester in Kent. But they didn't treat her kindly either. And what they used to do, they used to put her in rags, and every time the social services came round, they quickly put their daughter's clothes on her just to say that they've been looking after her. And she had to go out and do all the shopping. She had to clean the house, and she had to do all of this before she went to school, and even after school. And she didn't have a good life. And then one day, when she got to the age of 14, she returned home, and she went to go and put the key in the door, and then she found the door was locked, and she couldn't get in. And so she ended up knocking on the door, and the woman of the house, who's fostered my mum for a good couple of years, said, "Yeah, what do you want?" And she said, "Well, I want to come in, please." And she said, "Well, you don't live here." Promptly turned round, got her mum's suitcase, shoved it in her hand, slammed the door in her face. And can you imagine a 14-year-old standing on the doorstep wondering what the hell was where she was going to go, what to do? She must have had a foresight to get in touch with the social services. And so the next thing, she was put into a nursing home for children. And so she was put there, and she had to care for the children. And this was in a place in Biggin Hill. And so she spent her couple of years there. But it was when she was about 15, she contracted TB, tuberculosis. And so she ended up in hospital, and she was seriously, seriously ill. But she overcame that, came out, and then she was put somewhere else where she was caring and looking after in the nursery children in another place. And she contracted TB again. But this time she had TB and meningitis. So this time she died. And I remember she telling me, what's happened to her when she died. And apparently she remembers that she went up this black tunnel. And at the end of this tunnel, and she said it was really beautiful. And she said it was all white, and it was love, peace. And she said it was just so amazing. And she said that she remembered the grass, it was so green, and there was in front of her was a picket fence. And she got to this gate within the picket fence, and the man on the other side of her just looked at her and said, "Jean, it's not time for you to come here." He said, "You've got to go back." So reluctantly she did. She came back. Well, I'm glad she did, otherwise I wouldn't have been born. But anyway, she came back, and she ended up in a sanatorium in Preston Hall in Maidstone, and she was there for quite a while she was recovering. But once she's recovered, she didn't have anywhere to go, so she ended up being employed by them as a domestic servant. And the thing about this place, it was full of old people. And bearing in mind, my mum was young. She was quite a young lady. So they thought it wasn't a very good place for her to be. But luckily for her, there was someone there that knew people. And so she ended up going to St Thomas's Hospital to train as a proper domestic servant. So being trained as a domestic servant, she spent a couple of years there, and eventually she left there and she ended up working as a cleaner, I suppose, for want of a better word, at All Saints Hospital in Chatham. And while she was there, she met women, different people, and she started going out partying and enjoying life. And but on one occasion, while she was doing all the doctor's rooms, she went into a room and there was an awful thing that she saw. And she saw a man, a doctor, who had slashed his wrist and he's bled to death, and he committed suicide. And that really did affect her. And you can imagine it really must have affected her. But she just got on with it. I'm going to backtrack a little bit here, because this brings in my Aunt Sandra. While she was in care, if you like, they were told they were never to meet the rest of the children, the rest of her siblings. But my Aunt Sandra, being Aunt Sandra, said, I am not having any of that. So she did everything she could to meet her sister, my mum. And they used to do all sorts of things. And my Aunt Sandra, she used to get a good telling off a few times, to go behind the social services back, but she didn't care. And my mum only ever met her parents once. And that was shortly before my grandparents died. And they died within months of each other. And they were only 40, they were in their 40s, I think, about 44, 46. They were very, very young. So anyway, so Mum had to deal with all of that. So she really was on her own. So we're now going to go back forward. And then Mum went out. She met somebody, and she met this man, and his name was John Young. And he wooed my mum, so to speak, and also she ended up getting pregnant. So John Young, when he found out my mum was pregnant, did a runner. And he was in the Navy at the time, and apparently he was a cook, or he was something in the Navy at the Pembroke Docks, in Chatham Docks. So she told him, and he did a runner. The military police got hold of him, brought him back, and then she goes and discovers that he was already married and had children, which he'd lied, and as they did in those days. But he was ordered to pay 10 shillings a week, I believe, for my care. I was born in July of 1956. That makes me 68, so you can stop doing your maths. So I was born in 1956, and Mum had a pretty hard time, and I think she had postnatal depression. So she went out and she went to she tells me it was an ice skating rink, but I can't remember ever there being an ice skating rink in Chatham. I tried to find out, but maybe it was roller skating, so I don't know, but she went out. And on this particular night she met this man called Eric, and let's just say Eric wish she'd never met him, but still, never mind, we're going to go on with the story. He kept chasing after Mum, and he kept on saying, you know, I want to be with you, and I want to be with you, and all this, that and the other. And she went out with him for a while, and then they decided they were going to go, to get to know each other more and to get to know me, because I was a baby. They went for a day trip down to Margate, and don't know why, for some reason they didn't make the last train back from Margate home, and they concocted this plan apparently to go and disappear. And you can imagine my Aunt Sandra going frantic trying to find out where I was, because she was more concerned about me, because obviously I didn't have the bottles, no clothing or anything. They just me with my clothes, what I had. And they went and disappeared somewhere in a place called Derby. And eventually Mum came back because Eric decided he was going to be having an affair with other women whilst they were away. So she came back with a tail between her legs, so to speak, and you know, and then life continues on a little bit longer. But unfortunately, Eric wasn't going to be letting my mum go. It was then she discovered, a little bit later, when they went up to Scotland, because they're going to decide to get married. And they went up to Scotland. She discovered he was 5 years younger than her, and he wasn't even 21. And so he decided he was going to have affairs with other women. So she made her way back through the Salvation Army because she didn't have any money. And so eventually she got back to Chatham again. My Aunt Sandra took her in, and then Eric kept on saying, oh, I love you, you know, like men do. And so she took him back again, and she had to go and face his parents, Eric's parents that is, and to get the permission to get married. And apparently his mother engineered everything, and because she really didn't want Eric to be marrying my mother because he was beneath himself. So anyway, they got married. And let's just say that my stepfather abused me physically. And I was told at one time he used me like a baseball bat, you know, smashed my head against the wall. How I never got brain damage or serious injury, I don't know. And he used to beat my mum. When my mum came back down from Scotland, she discovered she was pregnant with my brother. So that didn't really help matters. And they were desperate, you know, got 2 children, had nowhere to live properly. And so they decided they were going to go and live with Eric's parents. Now, Eric's parents had a double-fronted house in Gravesend, and they had money. Apparently, his father was a major, and they had money. So there was a condition that I was to stay downstairs and be cared by the grandparents, and Eric, Mum and David, or my brother, was to stay upstairs. Mum was to have nothing to do with me. And that was distressing for my mum. But she thought, you know, what can I do? And I was just strapped in a pram. I was never allowed out. I was never allowed to walk. I was never allowed to play. I was just in that pram. They fed me, changed me, that's it. That's all they wanted to do. And my mum became very, very ill. You know, she was in hospital with pneumonia, and she was losing weight, and she was being beaten, and she used to keep going to the shelter for battered women. But, and in those days, you weren't allowed to leave your husband. They made sure that you stayed with your husband. You know, it was let's, for want of a better word, it was a sin. And then my sister came along as well. But before all of that, I think, yeah, it was whilst my sister was born. Could be before that, actually. I was put up for adoption. And because the church society felt it was best that I was put up for adoption, get me away from the family, to give the family, like Eric, mum and everything, a chance to survive, to get on. So I was sent up to somewhere in Manchester, I think. But my mum was so traumatised by all of this, so she decided that, she said she couldn't live without me. So she begged Eric to get me back, and eventually she did. They got me back. And to be honest with you, I wish they hadn't. But that's another story. That you will find out about that one later. But they got me back. And I was... I had a miserable existence, really. And to be honest with you, I don't really remember anything to do with my childhood. Because it's one of the traumas, I think, that is put at the back of my mind. You just... It's like if though you just put it in a little box, and you just put it there and you just put it at the back, and just now and again something might happen and make you react, it's like as if you wonder why you behave the way you do. And this became quite apparent much later when I found out more and what's been going on. So they got me back, and he then decided, Eric, that he was going to be moving into a caravan. And we moved into a caravan on a newly developed site, a bit like a mobile home really, and in Hoo, which is HOO. And this was sort of out in the country, if you like, and it was idyllic. It was a lovely place, and it was right on the River Medway, and right beside the caravan park was the Hoo Marina. And again, that one just started to have all boats and everything coming in. And we lived there for a while. And there was some happy time in Hoo. Don't get me wrong, there really was some happy time. And it was Mum who made it happy for us. But there was also some awful, awful times that happened. My abuse continued, and I was being sexually abused quite a bit. And I remember Eric saying to me, if you ever say anything, you know what you will get. No one will believe you. Because whilst this was going on, I think I must have been about 3.5. There was one particular time I was being beaten, and I was being beaten with a leather belt, and I was my face, my body, and I was screaming. I was badly bruised, and this was all to do with living in a tiny little red and cream caravan, I remember. And it was that bad that the people in the next caravan phoned the NSPCC, and they came out and they took me away, and I was made a ward of court to be cared for, and apparently he got 6 months prison sentence, and he made an appeal, and he said he shouldn't be sent to prison, he didn't deserve it, and but he did go to prison. It didn't do any good, because he still continues to do the abuse, if you like. And one of the things I can remember about being abused is I would never ever use a flannel, because I can always remember that there was always a flannel. I can't remember all the things that he did to me, but then that's not for you to know. Just enough to know that I was abused. And he was a clever man. He really was a clever man. And he played games. He played mind games. And I remember when my brother, he tormented my brother. He dressed him up in girls' clothes and tormented him. And I can always hear my brothers crying, you know, don't do this, Daddy, don't do this, Daddy. And one day, my brother went to see his daddy off to work. He waved to him out the window. And he came back, Eric came back and hit him for doing it. You know, I mean, what sort of man would do that sort of thing? And so, yeah, it wasn't a very good childhood. But I do remember the school that I went to when I was 5, and the school was right next to the church, and it was a lovely school. It was really old Victorian, and yeah, they used to have this fire in the middle of the room in this. Oh, I don't know what they call them now. It was in the metal thing in the middle of the room. So and we used to go out playing in playground and all the rest of it. But the problem was, unknown to people, I couldn't hear properly. And it was only when my mum was trying to talk to me one day and she was behind me that I wasn't responding. So she thought, right, okay. She took me to the doctors and I ended up going to Maidstone Hospital, ear hospital. And they discovered I was deaf. So, and I ended up wearing a hearing aid. It was a box that you used to have to attach to the front of the vest. And you had a long wire and it went round to the back and into your ear. And yeah, that was some journey, going all the way from Hers to Chatham to Maidstone, which used to take about 2 hours. And that was every so often. It was horrendous. So anyway, so I ended up with this hearing aid. And when you're a child and you were deemed to be different and you just got picked on, and you know, I don't know what it is about kids. Why do children want to torment and be nasty for people that are different? But here you go. And I ended up going to a partial hearing unit in Woodlands Road. Not Woodlands Road, Featherstone Road in Gillingham. So I was picked up every day early in a minibus and taken to this school. And yeah, I used to go to a specialist school for people that are deaf. And so we did that for a while. And the next thing we knew, we're moving again. And we ended up moving to Herne Bay into Eric's parents' house. And they lived in a very posh house. I mean, it really was posh. And it was on top of a cliff. And it had 3 bedrooms, but it had loads of rooms. It was totally detached. It had a tennis court, garage, and it had many bad memories associated with this. We turned up there. We ended up having to stay in one room. We weren't allowed to go anywhere. We had to be in this one room. 3 children, and we all shared a put-you-up settee. And opposite the room was a toilet, but we weren't allowed to use that because there was 2 Pekingese dogs, I think they were, living in there. And the grandmother, his mother, was the most evil bitch you could ever wish to meet. Now I know where her son gets it from. The whole family were totally dysfunctional. The whole family were evil. They used to try and trip my mum. They spat in our food. Our food used to end up on the floor, and Mum used to have to scrape it up, and we used to have to eat it because we had no other choice. They tormented her. They tormented us kids. And then one time, they even put poison in our soup. and all three of us were violently ill, and how we got through it, I don't know. We can't eat chicken soup to this day because of what they did. We were allowed to go out into the garden now and again, and the only thing we had to play with, would you believe, was ants. Ants! But we had no choice, we had to have our imagination. And but there was we did manage to get to see a few places in Herne Bay. We went to, there's a nice secluded beach, it's sandy. And if anyone knows of Herne Bay, it's pebbly, but this particular bit is all sandy. You have to go down a cliff to get to it. So we ended up in that place, and Rita, one of the daughters, she was having an affair with a married man. She ended up pregnant. Teresa, she was always out clubbing it and all whatever. Eric, my stepfather, still taking me out of my bed to put into his bed. But I think Mum must have been working night times. That's why she didn't know anything about it. In the house, it was old, it was Victorian. Everything that was in it was Victorian. There was all stuffed heads. There was, oh God, animal rugs, heavy furniture. Didn't see much of the grandfather though. He just seemed to keep out of the way. It was mostly the kids and the grandmother. And I can't even say her name because she's such an evil cow. Excuse me. That's my emotions, and I'm afraid this is what you will get, is some of my emotions, because that's how it was with me. And but anyway, we did go to a lovely school. In one school I do remember, in Vicolva, just outside Herne Bay, and it was a wonderful school, and it was right next door to a church, and the teachers were fabulous. We were allowed to play toys, school equipment, and all sorts of different things during the dinner time breaks and all the rest of it. It was a fabulous school. It really was. The most memorable school I ever went to. And then we used to go there by bus, us kids, and I was responsible for all three of us. And one day we decided that we was going to go and take, save Mum some bus fare money. So we decided to walk home. And the only way we could do it was to go through these fields, the farmers' fields. But we didn't know on this particular field there was a bull. And I looked at this, what I thought was just a cow, at the other end of the field. But something told me something wasn't right about this bull, this thing, and it started running towards us. And I shouted to my brother and sister, I said, "Run, and run like hell." And we did. We ran, and this bull was charging up towards us. We just got through the hedge and over the fence before the bull got to us. We didn't think anyone saw us, but God, it was a relief. We thought, we really did think we'd had it. And and then we thought we got away with it, but no. The farmer saw us, and he approached and had a word with Eric, and we all got a beating for that. And never was free to do that ever again. And whacked around the head and all this, that, and the other. Can you imagine what that was like? And so anyway, so we didn't. And life, like I said, it wasn't very good. But then one day, Mum came home from work early, and right outside the house was a big cement mixer, and it was my Uncle Peter's cement mixer, because that's what he used to do. He used to deliver cement in the lorry, because that was his own business. And Mum came rushing in. She said, "Right, get all your stuff together now." And this is what we did. We got it all together. We were thinking, didn't think anymore, because you don't, because you're a child. and we was all bundled into this lorry, and we were taken to Raynham in Kent. And this is where I'm going to leave it for now, because I'm going to give you the next part of the story on the next video. Please, I'm hoping you enjoyed that story, and I'm also hoping that you will follow me for the next one. And if you'd like to comment on it, please do. If you'd like to send me a message, please do. I would be glad to help and to answer any questions you may have. Please share. Let everybody know. Let everybody know, because this story that I'm going to tell you is the trials and tribulations and how I cope. Maybe you might get something from this. Maybe you'll understand, it's not just me that it's happened to. Anyway, like, subscribe, and until we meet again, take care.